Hello everyone, I'm Paul and today we're solving problem 1733, minimum number of people to teach. This is a medium one that might seem tricky at first, but the logic to solve this is actually very simple. So I would say this is all about observation. With this in mind, let's start. We are on a social network where there are friendships and languages. So let's say we're given this. We are given an array friendships where each element represents a friendship between these two. We are also given an integer n, which represents the total amount of languages that we have, and we are also given an array languages where each element represents the languages for the ith user, meaning the languages that the ith user knows. So here we have person number 1, person number 2, and person number 3. The languages for person number 1 are these. The languages for person number 2 are these. The languages for person number 3 are these. So here you can see the visual representation of this example. For example, person number 1 knows only language 1. Person number 2 knows only language 2. Person number 3 knows languages 1 and 2. Now here these and these friends cannot communicate with each other because this one knows only language number 1 and this knows only language number 2. But we can teach languages to different friends. And our job is here. We need to return the minimum number of users that we need to teach so that all friends can communicate with each other. So in this case, we can teach this one language 2, or we can teach this one language number 1. Given that the minimum number of users we need to teach is 1, we can just return 1 in this case. Now let's say we're given the input corresponding to this graph. Here we can choose either to teach language number 2 to user 2 and user 4, or to teach language number 3 to user 1 and user 3. So we know that the result is 2, but we need some kind of process. We need to find some pattern to solve this efficiently for any input. So what can we do here? Let's start small. Let's say we are here and we will have a set. We will call this cannot communicate. This is initially an empty set, and here we are storing every user who cannot communicate with some other user. First we are here, and this user speaks language 2, and this is connected to 2 and 4. Now, regarding this user, number 1 cannot communicate with number 2. We have no number 2 here. So we need to add here the current user, number 1, and we need to add this user also, number 2. Now we are comparing these and these users, and they cannot communicate with each other because they speak different languages. We already have number 1 here, so we only add 4. Next we are here. We already have 1 and 4, so we compare 4 and 3, and they can't communicate with each other because they speak different languages, so here we add number 3. So here we have the list of users who cannot communicate with some other user, and what this means is we need to teach languages to some of these users. Now the question is how many? Because we need to return the minimum number of users we need to teach. So here's the trick. We need to find the most common language among these users, and we need to teach this most common language to any user who doesn't know it. So if we are trying to get the most common language, we can use a map. So here we see number 3 2 times, so we have 3 as a key with a value of 2. We have number 2 2 times, so we have 2 as a key with a value of 2. And we have number 1 2 times. So we have number 1 with a value of 2. So the frequency for every language is 2 here, and this is fine. We can choose any language in this case. Let's say we choose language number 3. Now the next step is we need to teach this language number 3 to every user who doesn't know it. Meaning we need to teach this language to this user and this user. And this is 2 users, so we return 2. And how can we get this value? Well, we can take the size of this list, meaning 4, and subtract the frequency, the maximum frequency for the most common language, in this case 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. So this is the result. So this is basically the entire approach. We need to follow 3 steps. First, we need to find the friends who can't communicate, which is this part. Then we need to find the most common language. For this, we build a frequency map. We want to keep the language with the maximum frequency. In this case, every language has the same frequency, so we are picking number 3. And the final step is to teach this language to every user in this list who doesn't know this language. And what this means is we need to take the size of this list, 4, and subtract the frequency for this language. 4 minus 2 is 2. And we just return this. So step number 3 is to teach the language to the friends who don't know it. So this is basically the entire approach. Now let's go with the code and hopefully you will get the idea. First, we need to build a set to store every friend who cannot communicate with other friend. We will call this cannot communicate, and this is an empty set. Now we can iterate every friendship, so we can say for A and B in friendships. And first we need to subtract 1 from A. We do the same for B. And why are we doing this? Because later we want to be able to access languages A, for example. And these are the languages for user A. If we want to be able to do this, first we need to do this. And now we will check if users A and B can communicate with each other or not. And there are many ways to do this, but first here we'll use if any x equals y for x in languages A, for y in languages B, we just continue. This is a nested loop in one line. Here we are checking if any language from user A is equal to any language from user B, we just continue. Else, this means these users cannot communicate with each other, so we need to say cannot communicate.add A, and we do the same for B. And now we can go with the next step, with step 2. We can build a frequency map to find the most common language among these users who cannot communicate. So we'll call this FM for frequency map. This is a default dictionary with a default value of 0 for every key. Now for every friend in cannot communicate. And now for every language in languages friend, the frequency for the current language plus equal 1. And now if we do fm.values and we take the maximum among these, here we have the frequency for the most common language. And remember, we need to return the length of cannot communicate minus the frequency for the most common language, and it might be a case that this is empty. If so, this would throw an error, and to avoid this we can say or an array with 0. So this is it for the code. Now let's submit this and see if it works. As you can see, this works, but it doesn't look to be very efficient. And this is because we can improve this part. Instead of working with an array of arrays, which corresponds to languages for each user, we can work with an array of sets. So first we can say languages is an array with set L for L in languages. And after doing this, instead of this, we can do if languages A, and this is intersection languages B. So if we find any value in the intersection among languages A and languages B, we just continue. And this is way more efficient. Just to be clear, this is intersection of sets. So now let's submit this and see if it works. As you can see, this works and it's more efficient than the previous solution. And this is because here we go from big O of n squared time complexity to big O of n. Overall time complexity will be big O of m, where m is the amount of friendships. And this is times L, where L is the maximum amount of languages for one user. And this is plus the number of friends, we can call this n, times the maximum amount of languages for one user, we are calling this L. And space complexity will be roughly big O of n times L, mostly because of this part. So this is it for the code. If you found this useful, please drop a like, subscribe, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.